Hello everyone, welcome to Los Hijos del Rol, to a new episode of our series Story Always, in which we talk about indie RPGs with all kinds of cool people who are kind enough to come talk with us. In this occasion, we have with us James Ailes. I'm pronouncing that right?
Iles.
Iles. I swear to God, I searched for a podcast to hear what was the correct pronunciation. I could not get it right.
I wouldn't worry about it.
If it's any help, no one in the UK can pronounce my name correctly, so we're kind of.
No one in the UK can write my name correctly, so it's fine.
Good. So James, you probably. As many of you may know, he's the creator of the Powered by the Apocalypse game, Legacy: Life Among the Ruins. But also he's one of the co-creators of UFO Press, a publishing company that has published games such as Wizards Aren't Gentlemen, What How World, which is a game that is like that I feel is I'm not British enough to play it, and Ghost Ship, which is like a transhumanist game, so really cool stuff, and also the first edition of Legacy: Life Among the Ruins, and now the second edition, which is being kickstarted right now, which a lot of success. I think I'm going to check the Kickstarter right now. So the original goal was 8,000, and right now it's on 26,000. So that's a lot that has been able to fund, and it hasn't finished it yet. So it may go even further. And so yeah, thanks a lot, James, for being here today.
Oh, that's no problem. It's a pleasure.
So first of all, I want to tell everyone, I don't know if we have anyone watching us live yet, but for whoever might be there, feel free to ask questions during the whole interview. Try to check out the chat as often as possible and relate them to James so he can answer them. So and also, like, if you feel free to do it in English or in Spanish, and well, any other language, but I won't be able to understand it. So, so first of all, usually we would like to start these interviews kind of at the beginning. So, tell us, James, what was your first experience with RPGs? How did you find out about RPGs, and what did you like about them?
All right. So my first experience with RPGs in general was probably Baldur's Gate for the PC about 15, 20 years ago. I don't know how long ago that was. Some length ago. So I grew up playing these traditional computer RPGs. Eventually got access to the D&D books, which were 3rd edition at the time, and I wasn't very happy with those because I opened them up and I was like, oh, this is actually telling me how to play a miniatures war game. I wanted to play a role-playing game. And then I came to university and I was like, finally, I'll have a chance. Went to see what the role-playing game society was like. And they were saying, oh, yeah, some people probably play D&D, but mostly we do free-form role-playing with lots of costumes and stuff. And I was like, that isn't quite what I want, but it'll do for now. And I went along to that and started, dressing up as a Tudor period steampunk engineer. And from there, it became history, basically. And I was writing my first role-playing game system within a year to be run as part of that society's sort of free-form role-playing stuff.
What was it about, if you remember?
So that was The Broken World, which was run with a GM team of 5 other people. And the idea was that all the players live on sort of floating fragments of rock suspended between a sea of storms above and a sea of mist below. And it was sort of up in the air whether it was post-apocalyptic or whether this was just the way the world had always been. But essentially, it was about players trying to form a new society amongst the fragments and understand the world and all that sort of stuff. And then over the summer break, we wrote a new version of it, a sort of second edition of the game, and ran that again a few times later, which was sort of a few generations down the line. And now I talk about it, gosh, it seems very familiar.
Yeah, but I was thinking just about that, recreating a wall from the ruins, generations past. Seems familiar.
I mean, the second edition of it, we even gave players an explicit sort of family clan stat was what it was there. So there was mechanics for building improvements to your family fragment and that plot of land to make it better. So, God, I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah, so Legacy basically is a game that has been in the making for like 15 years, something like that.
Well, hey, this was when I was at university, so that's only like 10 years ago.
10 years, sorry. By the way, shout outs to the Oxford University RPG Society. They do really cool stuff. I could only experience it for like a little bit more than a year, but it was really great.
I'm not sure there's any place quite like it in terms of the games they run, but yeah. And then so after some of that freeform role-playing stuff, I started getting more heavily involved with traditional role-playing games. Let's see, I started with the sort of vampire stuff and a bit of D&D, but where I really sort of got started was running Dungeon World for the university tabletop society, for the sort of drop-in tabletop sessions I started running. Mm-hmm. So I ran Dungeon World pretty much every weekend for a year of term, although of course that's a year in university time, so that's only like 20 weeks or so.
Yeah, something like that. So that was the first Powered by the Apocalypse game that you ever played?
Yeah, I'd tried to set up a game of Apocalypse World before that, but the players really weren't into the whole limited playbook sort of thing. Like each playbook is a very specific niche, and people were coming in wanting to make their own sort of interesting character. Plus, I think the special moves on the playbooks sort of turn people off a bit.
Yeah.
They tend to do that, I think.
Yeah, which is a good thing because people who like that kind of stuff will like the game probably.
Yeah. So Dungeon World was my real entry point into PBTA.
And did it like immediately strike you as something different and interesting, or kind of?
So, I really liked the sound of Dungeon World from the get-go. Like, so I was one of the backers on their Kickstarter way back in 2012, I think. And I thought, well, this is sort of playing D&D how people always told me D&D was meant to be played, except that this time it actually has rules support for it. So I thought, yeah, I'll give that a shot. And, I ran it, and it was fun and enabled me to essentially run dungeoneering sessions off the seat of my pants and just improvise the hell out of them. And that's how I like to run things.
Nice. And how did you get in contact with the broader PBTI community, and how did the idea of creating Legacy came about?
So I was reading lots of stuff in the overall PBTA community on various forums, RPGNet, Google Plus. There were a lot of conversations there, storygames.com. But it was actually somebody on one of the Something Awful traditional games forums put together a Powered by the Apocalypse design contest, where the idea was that you would make a complete PBTA game in a month and win a prize. So I entered that. I built up Legacy over the course of that month, and in the end got second place, which got me £30, I think. I think it was about £30. And with that, I bought my first set of stock art to illustrate an actual nice version of Legacy, and then started playtesting that online, putting it up as a sort of pay what you want PDF. And within a year of that, I was kickstarting the first edition of Legacy.
That was back in 2014, right?
Yes.
3 years ago. So how I don't want to dwell too much on the previous Kickstarter, but what sort of things did you learn from that first experience? What kind of things that you had to learn the hard way that you know, and that you know not to do that again, that kind of stuff?
So the first thing I think is that you should come into these things already with a few months of steam behind your promotional stuff. You can't just start promoting it on day one of the Kickstarter and expect to do well. So there's a lot of getting people excited that needs to be done, and that doesn't actually cost you anything. So the first Kickstarter, I tried to throw money at advertising. Like I advertised on RPGNet, and I advertised on Facebook and Twitter, and I think RPG Geek. But in the end, that wasn't worth the money I put in. And I only realized like 3/4 of the way through the campaign that it would be actually good if I had records of what the game actually looks like in play. So, I hastily scheduled together a online play of the game, and that was fun, but could have done a lot earlier. Other than that, I think that wasn't a particularly disastrous Kickstarter in any way. I mean, it got me the funds I needed to make the game, and all the printing and fulfillment was done through Drive-Thru RPG, so I didn't actually need to mess up my hands with that. But yeah.
And over time, I think it built the momentum for this Kickstarter to have the success it has had.
I think so. I mean, the thing with Legacy is whenever I'd go to a convention to promote it, there'd be someone coming up and saying, "Oh man, Legacy, I had a great time with that," or something like that. But there didn't seem to be any sort of buzz online. People weren't really talking about it. And maybe that's just because I suck at like search engine optimization or self-promotion. But yeah. Well, I don't know where I'm going with that.
So, what made you decide to create a second edition of Legacy?
Okay. So, I'd sort of not written off Legacy, but put it far aside and wasn't planning on doing any more work on it. But then about a year and a half ago, a guy from Brazil contacted me and said he had a pitch for another Legacy book. And I was like, oh, okay, and read it. And we began working together on that and ended up publishing it. And, we're still working together now on the second edition of Legacy. And that guy, Douglas, actually having someone excited about the game that I could talk to meant that I actually started thinking, oh, I do have all these ideas of things I want to do with the games and things that never quite worked well for me for the first edition and things that I know I could do better. And so, we started working on more and more of these ideas for a book. And the trouble was we were thinking, okay, in order to put out this extra supplement, we want to put in this extra rule system or edit this particular thing. But then people will need all of the supplements to have the better rules and all that sort of thing. So why don't we just do a revised edition of Legacy? So we started working on that, and then that sort of snowballed a bit and got, bigger and more elaborate, and we ended up changing pretty much every mechanic of the system in some small way or another. So we thought, let's just call it a second edition and be done with it. Because by this time, Apocalypse World had had its second edition, and Monster Hearts had had its second edition. Monster of the Week had had its revised edition, I guess. I don't think they explicitly called it a second edition. So we thought, yeah, it's probably about the right time for it.
So now, now that we're talking about the game itself, I think it's one of the things I usually do in a story always when we talk about a game with the author is do the we want to do the classical thing of asking about the three Sorensen questions.
Okay.
Not really. Normally we use them kind of like to make sure if this game is good or not, but this is more like to get a. But I'm making the interview with you because I like the game already, and I want people to like the game. This is more of getting some insight into the game and how do you see the design of the game from your perspective. So first of all, what is Legacy Life Among the Ruins second edition about?
So the game is about rebuilding after an apocalypse. Something has gone terribly wrong with the world, such that the old ways of living are completely unsustainable, either because they're all in ruins or because they rely on a mode of interaction with the world that's no longer working. You are the survivors of that. You've started along the path of learning how to adapt to the new world, and as the game progresses, you will adapt and evolve and go through multiple generations of changing the world into its new form. So it's about rebuilding after the apocalypse, but not rebuilding in a way that recaptures the old world, but creating something new.
Talking a little bit about that, why did those themes about rebuilding something from the ashes and that kind of and also those generational aspects of the game, why did those things interest you so much that you wanted to make a game about it?
Okay, so I remember thinking ages back. So I'm a big fan of the 4X genre of games, things like Civilization or Alpha Centauri or Endless Legend, and I liked the grand scale of those things and how you take a group from small things to this huge world-spanning empire or whatever, and the civilization at the end of that is almost impossible to recognize the civilization from the start, but you played that whole thing. And at the same time, I enjoy post-apocalyptic fiction a ton. Like I love the Fallout games or the Mad Max TV series, as well as got all sorts of books that cover it. The biggest, most relevant one for Legacy is A Canticle for Leibowitz, which is set after a nuclear apocalypse and follows a religious order dedicated to reproducing the wiring diagrams of an engineer in sort of gold illumination, and how they sort of change the impact that they have over the world as it goes. And it ends up with the new civilization on the cusp of wiping itself out in a atomic maelstrom. But so I wanted to make a game where you take a group from very small things to huge things. And also I wanted it to have a sort of blank slate, as in it was up to the group what the world before was like, and it's absolutely up to the group where they go from there. Like one of the key concepts for Apocalypse World is that you play to find out what happens. And I know it's not specifically meaning this, but I wanted that in Legacy, where you didn't know where the group was going to end up. Unlike in Civilization, for example, where you know that you're probably going to end up with the space age and launching a rocket to Alpha Centauri, and that's how you win. So the post-apocalyptic setting was natural for that.
Okay, so now that we have a clear idea of what the game is about, how how is the game about that? What sort of mechanics do you use to enforce that kind of stories and that kind of fiction and that kind of feeling?
Okay. So the big one is that we have mechanics for the turning of ages, uh, which is that once you're done with a certain time period, you move the clock forward a generation or a decade or a century or however long the group feels will be impactful. And you work through the effects that this has on the world, the effects this has on each particular family, and rebuild the world. Um, of course, the family is the biggest mechanic I think that this game has compared to other PBTA games. In fact, compared to other role playing games in general, I can only think of a few where you have this second layer.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so the part of the game is that you zoom in and zoom out from the character level to the family level and back, and that's a matter of physical scale, as in family moves might affect entire regions or huge amounts of people, whereas character level is very personal. But it also affects the time scale. So with a character move, you might, with character actions, when you're focusing on a group of characters, that might only take a few days, whereas you might go out to the family level in order to pass through months of action. So I made sure that there was this flexibility in the time scale so that the group could change the scope as required and zoom in and zoom out to actually capture the dramatic moments in history. A bit like Microscope, if you've played it.
Yeah, a little bit. I know a little bit about it. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think especially at the time of the first edition and even now, it was really forward thinking. Like now we have Place in the Dark, which is not exactly the same. It has the band structure, but it still doesn't work like a character. Because one thing I felt is that when I played, because I had the opportunity to play test it, which was really cool. One thing I felt that was that the family was another player. Was like I was actually a player that you can play with, as opposed to just like a structure above the
Yeah.
player. Which is really cool.
Yeah, in Blades in the Dark, your crew is more a sort of source of passive benefits and equipment, I think. You don't really tend to act at the crew level, which... so it's closer in many ways to something like Rain, where you have a company that the group controls. But, with that PBTA gloss over it.
For example, talking about these mechanics, what changes do we have from the previous edition in the in the way we interact among the different levels of the game, among the family level, the character level, that kind of stuff? What things have changed from the previous edition?
Okay, so, I mean, there's been minor tweaks and changes to most all the moves, but the big standout ones, I'd say, is that firstly, that each character has a role within their family that goes into how they relate to the rest of them, whether they're a leader or an agent or a rebel or an outsider. And this sets what sort of relationship you have with your family, what that character's particular goal is going to be right now, and also lets the player declare some things about the world. Another big thing is that we've added a lot more focus to the map that you build as a group of your wasteland over the course of the game. So you build it together at the start of the game, and your choices for how you build your family actually affect the map features that will result. And then once you're in play, you can add to the map, you can make use of different bits of it for advantages, and yeah. And let me think. Another thing we're adding right at the much broader scale is that over generations, your family can construct wonders,
Oh yeah.
which are great, huge constructions which permanently change the world. And they're not necessarily physical. Like, you can build a capital city, which is going to be huge and redefine everything. But you can also plunge the homeland into war or revolution, or you can discover a new land over the horizon where people can try and live. So those are pretty cool, and they can create a bit more sort of player versus player tension because you have to invest resources into these things to build them up over time, and whoever completes them then triggers a huge sort of time skip as you work through the results that all of that had. And those results are probably going to be a lot better for the person that built the thing than for everyone else.
Yeah, wonders are one of the things that I saw from the second edition that were really cool. They remind me, there's something like that in games like Age of Empire, I think, that kind of stuff. When
Yeah,
you build up, I don't know, the Eiffel Tower or things like that, depending on the game.
indeed.
I'm interested about then. What made you think about including there in the game?
So that was a suggestion from Douglas as something he wanted to add in, because the book that he was pitching to me was very much about how to increase the sort of antagonism in the game. I mean, that's probably a bad way of putting it, but add a bit more of a Cold War vibe between the factions, give them reasons to oppose each other as well as to work together. So he also added in the subterfuge mechanics and NPC factions that might be manipulating other players, as well as player-controlled families that were a bit more hostile than you'd normally expect, like the Robot Hive or the stranded Starfarers. So sort of inhuman families that might be a bit antagonistic with everyone else. But yeah, I think what I like about the Wonders in general is that they really let you make a huge change to the world, but they also work quite well in terms of the game's pacing. So they make a clear thing where you've got, the character level, you've got things happening over days, the family level, you've got things happening over months, and then at the wonder level, you've got things happening over multiple generations. And all of these things have big impacts on the world.
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting, especially the part where it's kind of like cross-generational stuff, something that you build among different generations and that will perdure among all the generations. It's a really interesting artifact of the game. Talking about that, can you tell us about a little bit about the changing generations mechanics and how they have they changed, or what purpose do they have?
Okay. So essentially, when you move from one age to the next, which basically happens whenever the group wants it to. So once you're tired of whatever is happening at the moment, and well, not tired of it, but when you want to change things up a bit, you can call for everything to turn on. Then it's a move like any other. You roll and add your mood, which is your family's balance of resources they have versus needs that they require. So the more flush your family is, the better they'll do over long periods of time. And then depending on how you roll on that, you'll pick certain amounts of negative things that happen to you and certain amounts of positive things that happen to you. And each of these, of course, affects what happened to your family. It also affects the map. It affects your stats. It affects what sort of things are out there as possible plot points for the next stage. And then you edit the map, tweak things to show what's happened over the time. You as a group talk over what the culture of the wasteland is now and how the technology level has changed, all these things. and then you make new characters to deal with the new issues that you have formed.
Talking about that, well, and also talking about characters in a broad sense, how do you think it affects the play that the players have different characters over time, that they change character over time?
Well, I really love it. I think what's really nice is that each character gives a different sort of insight into the family, because the particular playbook you pick is going to have a very different cast on things. So, if you're playing a straight up soldier from one family, you're going to use their resources in a particular way. If you're playing a explorer or a technologist or a diplomat from the family, it's going to be a completely different way. But you can always call on some of the resources of older characters from the family. They leave behind a relic that you can carry with you and use to call on their powers, which is really nice. I mean, it's a game about history, so part of that is enabling you to lay down this legacy of heroes.
I mean, it's literally in the name.
Well, I mean, yeah, exactly.
And I think that's one of the things I love the most about the game, the sense of a history that you build for your own characters, of your character doing something, and then that thing becoming a legend for the next generation, becoming part of their history, of their common culture, which is something I don't think many other games do that, if any. At least role-playing games that I know.
Yeah.
So talking about a little bit more about the characters, talking following with the last question of the three certain questions. This game is about all these cool things we have talked about, but how do you make players? How do you encourage players to do that, to play into that?
Okay. Well, part of that is handled by it being a Powered by the Apocalypse game, So the only mechanics I write are mechanics that help drive players towards that. And that's, throughout. So most of the character moves that you can call on will have some sort of lasting effect on the world. It might be temporary, or it might be permanent, but it's going to have a pretty wide scale thing. So Legacy's moves, even at the character scale, don't tend to be focused on the minutiae. Like in Dungeon World, you'd have a combat move that's for each sword blow or each arrow volley, because that's what the game's interested in, is interested in the blow by blow of each fight. Legacy has a single move, you roll it once, and that tells you how well the fight goes. And so the moves try and encourage this sort of broader view. And of course, there's the family and character level sort of style of things. So you've got the ability to just zoom out and spend a few months gathering rumors or sending an army to claim a resource. And having that written on the sheet in front of you is going to just encourage players to do it more. It's also that the system is designed such that it's often possible to reach some sort of accommodation with the world, to talk to the monsters or to drive them away or that sort of thing. I mean, there's one of our basic moves is to de-escalate a situation. And I mean, yes, you can fight and you can do all these other things, but Legacy is more than anything else a game about understanding and coming to some sort of what's the word? Sort of building a new relationship with the world. And maybe that means defeating the army of aliens that are trying to eat you all. But maybe it also means introducing some sort of weird mutation into your family's food supply so that they can all now breathe the toxic air that was threatening to kill you all.
yeah, sort of reaching a sense of an equilibrium with the world, uh, a connection with the world that surrounds you.
Mm. And that's also why a lot of the moves, like when you try and call on advanced technology that you found around, that always has the possibility of awakening more weird stuff around you. Because the idea is that there is weird stuff all around you, sort of slumbering there, waiting to be made use of or misuse of.
Yeah, I've suffered. I mean, enjoyed that. Yeah, and it's actually really cool. It can lead to really interesting stories.
Mm,
Talking about a little bit about the violence in the game, because not so recently, weeks back, since I've been lurking around Twitter recently.
mm,
Um, I read a thread that you wrote about violence in your how did you deal with violence in your game, and how did you try to make it always that there's always other options to deal with situations.
yeah.
Why was this important to you?
Um, so I think partially it's because a lot of post-apocalyptic fiction tends towards violence as a default state.
Hmm.
Like if you look at I know, The Walking Dead, at least in the comics, is something I keep returning to because it's a bit of a disappointment for me. But a lot of post-apocalyptic fiction is, don't trust outsiders, always be ready to um, murder somebody because that's the only way you're going to survive. And it's all very sort of this kind of macho toxicity that is not particularly cool for me, at least.
Hmm.
Plus, there's the whole idea that in role playing games, we tend to have a lot of systems for murdering people and not many systems for making things better. And, well, it seemed in keeping with the game to try and foreground the making things better side of things.
Yeah, after it's a game about building a civilization. If the only
Yeah.
thing you can do is like kill other people, if that's your only tool, you may be able to do it. There have been points of history where that has worked, but it's good to have other options.
Well, yeah, it's like, well, it's sort of somewhat ideological for me in that, I'm not quite as pacifist possibly as I was when I wrote it, but the idea that in general, by committing to violence, you're increasing the chaos of a situation and you're making the whole thing more dangerous. And it's unlikely that that's going to lead to better outcomes. I mean, it can lead to better outcomes, especially when your choice is between the bad outcome of having to fight and kill and the worse outcome of having you and all the people getting killed. But getting people to consider the former, getting them to consider whether there's another alternative is important. I think
I think that's
it's a bit like it's a bit like how Unknown Armies
yeah.
second edition starts its combat chapter with a whole list of ways in which you could possibly de-escalate a situation instead of murdering somebody.
Yeah, I've read that it's just amazing. That it's just like you could have done this, you could have done all of these things, but instead you chose to come here, and now either he's going to die or you are going to die, and it's going to be nasty either way.
Yeah, exactly. So that was it was the idea of sort of what sort of story do I want to tell, and that's the one.
Okay, quick question that they have asked in the chat. JT, that well, that I don't want to murder your name, so I'm just going to call you JT. If that's okay. He's asking a quick question about the map. Is the idea that all of the families live in the homeland and the west? Is the idea that all of the families live in the homeland and the wasteland is generally uninhabitable for normal people?
Yeah. So, well, at the start of the game, your map will be divided up into two broad regions. Also, hello, JT. I think we've talked a bit on G Plus. So it'll be divided up into two locations. There's the homeland, which is, where your players have their settlements, where they've worked out how to live there, and the wasteland outside it. And it's sort of more a conceptual thing than a geographic thing. The idea is that the homeland is where you're generally considered to be safe, and the wasteland is where you're unsafe. I mean, in systems mechanical terms, any time that you're traveling through the wasteland, whether that's between two locations in the wasteland or out from the homeland or back again, you use the wasteland survival move, which is just that sort of bit of risk that means you might run out of supplies, or you might run into danger, or you might take far longer. But it also comes with, the chance to discover something new in the wasteland. And the idea is that as you as you play through your game, maybe what is homeland and what is wasteland changes. Like one of the things you do as ages turn is you redraw that sort of border, and that maybe can mean that maybe can represent you as a family going out and making a particular place safe to live and claiming it for yourself, in which case, that's part of the homeland now. Or it could represent an incursion of terrible monsters that have absolutely devastated a section of your land, and thus that bit's wasteland now.
Yeah, that tends to happen.
Yeah. So people can live outside the wasteland. Like it's quite possible you'll run into other survivors, other scavengers, and not to mention the monsters that live there in the wasteland might consider themselves people. But it's not where you as players know how to live, or where you as players can travel freely.
He also asked if the size and scale of the map is up to the group, or if there's guidelines about how large the area should be.
It's basically up to the group. It's as far as you want it to be. Like, I've had games where it was essentially the size of maybe a large city. I've had games where it was essentially a few decks of a ship. I've had games, where it almost went up to the size of a country. But it's basically, when you're setting up your game, that's going to be one of the things you discuss as a group.
Oh, by the way, what gave you the idea to use a map for the second edition, to use the map as a tool?
So I've always drawn maps whenever I played Legacy. I mean, that's one of the Dungeon World principles, is draw maps and leave blanks. Mm-hmm. Because when you have something on the table in front of people, they can point to it, they can say what's between this and this, you get a sort of whole spatial sense of what's going on. And when we were making when we were making second edition, and we started wanting to put in these mechanics where your choice of family stats affects what the homeland looks like, we thought, well, we might as well do more of that. We might as well make this a really core part of building the setting, which is where you also define landmarks in family creation now. And part of that is inspired by games that are all about drawing a map. Things like The Quiet Year by Avery Modoldno is a very good game. And that's just entirely the bit of, drawing a thing on the map, working out what this means, having another event, drawing something else on the map, and all that sort of thing. Maps are great. I love maps.
Yeah, and also I love Avery. She's just great.
Yeah, they're a great designer.
So talking about the design of the game, would you say, what mechanic or particular aspect of the design was the one you think was was the hardest to design? What made you like stay away for nights and that kind of stuff?
Let me think. So there are bits that have always sort of irritated me a little, but it's difficult as a designer to know whether something feeling inelegant is a problem or it's just, how it is. Because obviously the ideal is that you create this perfect gleaming clockwork where everything all turns together and makes something wonderful. But sometimes you can just put a subsystem out, and if people like it, they can like it, and if they don't, they don't. But the thing that's gone through the most revisions, I'd say, when we're making second edition is probably the character gear system. Because for first edition, it was quite simplistic. So every family had a list of gear that everyone got, and every character had a list of gear that they got. But I wanted for second edition to more tightly integrate that into the family's resources and allow people to customize it a bit better to fit their idea of what the family was like. So we went through all sorts of different versions of this that had a lot of bookkeeping and all that sort of thing. And so tried to end up on a system where your surpluses give you a resource of tags that you can pull on to define your gear and outfits and that sort of thing. And that's probably the thing I'm still looking at as, is this actually working? Is this something we want to change? That sort of thing.
Cool. What would be the as opposed to that, what would be the thing that you feel the proudest about? The thing that if after the nuclear apocalypse only one part of your game survived and the new civilization found it, what would they want you to? What would you want them to find? What would be the thing that you are really proud about?
Goodness. All right. I really like the whole game setup procedure. The whole thing where you make your family and that defines what the world is, and then you make more choices about the family and that defines what landmarks the world has, and then you make a character from the family and then you pick a role from that, and that defines what the current state of the family is and what that character is trying to do right now. And I've never not had fun building a world with this game. I just love that whole system. I could just keep doing that without even playing the game. I mean, not the actual game is bad. It's just that's first thought. That's what I really am happy with that. Particularly actually the character role system, and the way we've made it so that when you change so we made it so that changing your character's role and the way they relate to their family is how you actually advance in the game and get more interesting stuff.
Yeah, I felt that since the beginning you have this sort of roles that come with particular things that you have to do to accomplish them. It allows you to have sort of objectives about what you want to do. Like I remember that with my character I started like as an outsider, but almost from the beginning I was looking at the leader role. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to start as an outsider and I'm going to end up as the leader of my group.
Yeah. And yeah, I just love how essentially you can sort of see the shape that your character arc might take, but you can obviously freely adjust that. So you can say, all right, I'm a agent now. Do I think that I'm going to become a leader later or a rebel or an outsider? And one of the things we're actually quite excited for down the line, which fingers crossed will unlock these supplements, is ones that add extra roles to the game.
Oh, cool.
So I think Douglas is playtesting those at the moment, so I probably can't say too much about those, but we have ideas.
Nice. So talking a little more about the Kickstarter itself, so what cool things do we have on the Kickstarter other than main core books? What stretch goals? What add-ons? What other cooler stuff we can get?
Let me think. Okay. Well, the book is wonderful. The book is. I'm very happy with the book. I've been, I've been okay with the print quality of first edition. It's all right, but it's not nearly as good as some of the other role-playing games on my shelves. And this is my chance. This is my chance to stand among them. So I've been having a lot of help and advice from the folks at Modiphius, who are really great makers of games. I recommend, if you like the sound of Legacy, that you also check out Mutant Year Zero of theirs, which is very good. A bit more on the traditional end if Powered by the Apocalypse isn't your speed. But so with the Kickstarter, you can get a physical hardback of the game, which we're planning on coming in at about the same size as Blades in the Dark. So that same sort of size format, but in full color and lovely. We also have a deluxe edition of that we're going to be making with fake leather cover and gold stamping and a slipcase and all that lovely thing. But what I'm actually most excited about is the game content. So I have at least 3 unlocked at the moment. Alternate settings for Legacy, and these are taking the game in a whole different direction. Still keeping to the structure where you have a faction and a character, and you're exploring over long time periods. But let's see, we've got one where you're people who have woken up a bit too early on a generation ship flying between the stars, and now have to work out how to live in this place that was never meant to,
Host them.
Host you over that long of time, and steer the ship to a place where you can all live. And that what's quite interesting about that is A, you're stuck in this one location and with very limited resources, and B, it has an end game with you actually getting the ship to a planet and seeing what that does. Then we have Free from the Yoke, which is a fantasy setting, sort of a bit like Game of Thrones, where you are members of a fantasy kingdom that have recently been liberated from an empire. And the big thing about that is that there is this NPC faction that is huge, that is sort of the king of the area, and that all of you have to sort of pay, bow the knee to. But probably not for long, eh? And so there'll be mechanics for, when one of the players' family becomes the arbiter in charge of everything, and how does that sort of hierarchy affect things. And then finally we've got Primal Pathways, which is written by one of the other playtesters, Lawrence, and that's about evolution, all the way from single-celled life forms to, complex civilizations. And in that, players take the role of a sort of guardian spirit, watching over a particular lineage of animals, and possessing one of the animals at a time to, go on adventure, change things, all that sort of stuff. And hopefully we've got a few more being unlocked as the Kickstarter goes on. Yeah, there's also fancy things like dice and dry erase character sheets and all that sort of stuff. But yeah,
I also want to mention the art of the game, which especially for the first edition was really good. The second edition is just amazing. It's one of the things that impressed me the most initially, at least. The drawings for the game are just incredible.
They really are. I am very, very pleased I got to work with this artist. And we are only about £1,000 away from getting a ton more art from them. So I'm very excited for that.
So I don't want to say anything, but come on, just come fucking on. What's the name of the artist, by the way? I think it deserves to be named.
The artist is Tithi Luadthong. I think I pronounced their name right. They are from Thailand. And they've been churning out the art at an astonishing rate. Sort of every time I check their artist profile, there's some sort of new awesome vista that they've put out. So it's great to watch them make stuff.
So I think to end the interview, I think my last question is going to be, from all the new things, cool things that we're getting from the second edition, what is the thing that you are more excited about for the people to get their hands on?
What other thing I'm most excited? To be honest, it's I think the core book is just going to be a great thing to have. Like, we've literally crammed everything that we had in first edition in there, every idea we've had since. It's going to, I hope it's going to be a beautiful book, because, you know, it's got Tiffy's art. We have Ollie Jeffrey, who's done really good work with the Gauntlets magazine, Codex, doing the layout for it. Not to mention, I'm sure the writing is going to be all right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got an editor, so, you know, it's about it. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great book to have, and I'm really excited to see what the deluxe edition ends up looking like in person.
So yeah, I think so. I recommend everyone who's watching this to at least check out the Kickstarter. The game is really cool. The ideas behind the games are really cool. I think the second edition really is one that is worth getting it. That is really improves upon the things that were really good, fixes the problems there was, adds all kinds of cool new stuff, and also, so I've left the link of the description of the video, together with the James Patreon and the link to UFO Press. So go check all those things up. And yeah, thanks a lot, James, for being here again.
No worries.
It has been a pleasure, and I wish you all the success that you are already having, but even more.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, it's great to be on here, and awesome.
So I think that's all for us, guys. Thanks a lot. Thanks to everyone who was here with us on live on the interview. Thanks to those who made questions, and I hope you all like it. And feel free to leave comments, thinking, making more questions, and talking about the game on the comment section. And until the next time, as I always, this is something my guests usually don't know, but I always say goodbye in the same way. So we'll do that once again until the next time. So live long and prosper, and may the force be with you. Goodbye.